G'day traders, welcome to the blog for Monday the 20th of August. So I've got daily chart here. Obviously this particular area here where got a combination of the fact that we've got summer break in the US and Europe, and this market's sitting at its multiple year highs here. So it's really slowed down. There's not a lot of volume coming through the market. Combination of those two things are certainly going to slow things down for the rest of this week. We saw it happen last week. They'll start coming back from holidays towards the end of this month, so hopefully we'll see volume pick up. But in saying that, even in these slow markets, I think there's always opportunity. You just got to stick to your plan, but just kind of look at it a slightly different way. And I'll bring up the 5-minute, 1-minute charts and sort of talk about that in a sec. But just here we've got the 15-minute chart. So we always bring this up and providing a bit of a link between those short-term charts and the daily charts. And this shows a bit of what's going on. Something that I was looking at, if you draw a line in here, it gives you a bit of an idea of support and resistance more on the shorter term. So you can see basically in the last day and a half. So here, sorry, to step back, this is the day here that we just had. So here's Monday here. Basically the last day and a half, there was sort of this region which we stuck above 1411. As we're opening up the pre-market, it started to get some pressure down and try to get through that. So if we all of a sudden see, so if you keep that line in mind and just to keep a view on the medium term, if all of a sudden you see it's pushing underneath there and using that as resistance and pushing lower, then you could really expect some downward movement from the day. And for those that saw the opening of the markets, the Russell and the Nasdaq were really trying hard to push down, and the ES was trying to go, but it was the Dow Jones that really stuck strong and resisted the sellers, and eventually was the one I think that turned them all around back to the upside. So this was a real pivotal point, or quite a decisive area for the markets in there, and they got a bounce. And if you're kind of keeping an eye on the medium term charts, you get a bit of an idea that possibly they're rejecting those sellers and these buyers have still got a little bit of strength. That's the way I interpreted it, just around that period there, just keeping an eye on that. And it just always helps you believe that you're taking a little bit of a longer term view. I think sometimes dailies, especially of where we are at the moment, where there's not a lot happening, it's a little bit hard to gauge exactly what's going on. But if we have something like a 15-minute chart, we're keeping a little bit of a longer term view, and we're trying to block out some of that noise which we might get from 1-minute or even 5-minute charts. A bit of erratic behaviour, even though at the moment the markets are very slow. But this certainly shows things, and you can get an idea of and sort of take into account the last 1, 2, 3 days, which is quite important. Even in day trading, where you're going for a 2-3 point profit, just gives you a real gauge on where the market's heading, and you pick up the direction a little bit better. And for that reason, you can feel a bit more confident with your trades. Another thing is something that I use as far as getting an indication of direction and where the market might be heading to is trend lines. Trend lines is just a vertical version of support and resistance, and there's always some sort of trend line happening. So this particular one here, we're still within the vicinity of it, so I keep on extending it because the market keeps on reacting to it. So it was started way back here when we had 1, 2, 3 points, or 4 points basically. Drew that in, and then we bounced off it there, especially when you see it bounce underneath and then bounce above it. That really consolidates the trend line. Then around here they sort of paid attention to it, got a rejection off it here. Again, they're just dealing around this trend line. Just before the opening of this market here, we dealt, again, another rejection. So we've got some power down to this support line here. So watching, again, that's very much influencing this area. If we get through this trend line, that's very much an indicator that we could be heading down for a little bit. But in the end, they're able to hold that and get a bounce. If you go back through the markets, for me, everyone interprets it slightly different. As long as you just keep on putting them in it, putting the lines on there and approaching it in a systematic way and doing it your way, that's what matters, and keeping it consistent, and you'll get some sort of form from this. And just basically going through the market, you can see there's always some sort of trend line which the market's reacting to. This one here was really quite significant. I was loving this trend line. So many times the market respected it almost to the tick. But that's drawn on the 15-minute charts. Find something that works for you and your niche. Maybe it's you draw it on the 5-minute charts, or maybe you want something a little bit longer term, 60-minute charts. I think something a little bit longer than the 5-term charts is needed, because we're trading off the 5-minute and the 1-minute charts. Quite often, trend lines and support and resistance lines can get a little bit muddled up, but if you have something a little bit longer term, they tend to be a little bit more respect, and the market has time to recognise those areas. So that's just what's happening on the 15-minute charts at the moment. As far as these 5-minute charts, 1-minute charts, obviously day-to-day price action at the moment, there's very little happening. But what I want to point out is it doesn't mean that there's no opportunities. Obviously, yes, that there's probably going to be less opportunities, but that doesn't mean less profitability. That's for sure. I'm just finding it, even though myself, my trading plan, I'm probably taking maybe 50% of the trade, so literally half the trades that I normally take in a week. But certainly the profitability or the points and things hasn't dropped off. It's in these kind of slower markets, you have time to really redefine what you're about and what you're trading, and really take a kind of look at your trading plan. And the markets tend to really respect support and resistance lines because they're moving slower. They have time to move with a little bit more form, and you don't get some erratic behavior. So in these fast moving markets, it's quite often possible to have, depending on your system, but 2-3 stop outs in a day. That could happen. Whereas a file like this, maybe you're just getting a couple of opportunities, and so that the downturn isn't so bad. So look at it that way. There's certainly opportunities, just not quite as many, but that doesn't take away from what you're going to achieve at the end of the year, by all means. And looking at your system, you have to decide how you do approach slower times like this. Okay, so obviously if you look at the 1-minute chart here, if you scroll through this, it's very hard to get an idea of what's happening there. It's almost looks like it's gone sideways, and there's nothing to do there. Go to the 5-minute charts, and you can see it's that same action. Obviously it's squashed up, but there's certainly some form there. There's certainly some movement, and you just have to be prepared. And this is where you have to really be clear with yourself as to how you approach markets in these slower markets. But just be very clear with yourself as to what you do. There's trading opportunities here, but you might have to wait, hours or half a day, or even a whole, sort of a whole session to get to your profitability, to your profit. But there's still the opportunities are there. They're just going to take longer than normal. That's the sort of thing you have to really kind of work out and identify for yourself. So as far as today goes, I'm not even going to go over the 1-minute chart. There's just not enough movement there. I just really want to more look at the 5-minute chart here and sort of what was happening with the direction. To start off with, we sort of, if you imagine, we've got this pre-market. I always like to define the pre-market. So you've got a line there, and you've got sort of a line here. Okay, so that's, at the moment, that's about a 2, 3, 4, 5, about 5-6 point range. Quite often it works better if there's like a 3-4 point range. You could even draw another one in here. I was looking at this region here as well. So I start off defining the pre-market as this. Once we start the movement, you can see we're bouncing between areas here. I really define it as this area here. So, get rid of that line for a second. So now we've got this area here, and the market tried to go down, it tried to go up, then eventually came down. Okay, but when we're coming down through here, the ES never actually broke through this pre-market support area. Oh, not till later on, but at first it didn't. Okay, the Nasdaq and the Russell, they were all pushing down really quite heavy. But if you look at the Dow Jones, it was holding really well and trying to head back to the upside. So there was sort of this conflict between the markets. They weren't all going together. Then all of a sudden everything started to flip around and push to the upside. So then, kind of with a little bit more togetherness, if that's a word, they started to head to the upside. And now I'm looking, I've got this area marked. So if we see this market start breaking up through here, and then maybe coming back and getting support off the top of this pre-market range, and all our markets going that direction, well then again that's a little bit more information saying, okay, maybe we're going on the upside here. So whether you want to trade it or whether you just want to use it as just a region to give you more of an idea of what these markets are doing based on this pre-market. So very much to start off with, even though there's movement, we're sticking within this range. Eventually the ES got to the downside, and when we got to the downside here, you watch the Dow Jones actually followed as well, and all the markets were heading down. Okay, then we had this pullback here. The predictives crossing down, so there wasn't actually 5-minute sell here, it was too close to the lows, but this was an area where it looked like the markets potentially want to go back down and have a look at its lows. Think about this area, but through here, yes, you wait, seeing if it wants to go to the lows. If all of a sudden it starts turning around and starts breaking this little bit of what I call a pivot point here, then there's going to be a bit of a change in momentum, and this is really where the market changed from a bit of a bot, right in this couple of candles here, from potentially a seller's area, keeping an eye on that 15-minute chart and everything was going on, that everything was trying to push down. Then all of a sudden it changed from a seller's area to a bit of a buyer's, basically the rest of the day being a buying day, right here. It's an area where the sellers tried to go lower from. They should have went lower if if they truly were in control, but it flipped around and they started breaking through this area where the sellers tried to launch from, and from there, this is where the buyers went. They pushed up, came back, used that same area of support, and then from there they pushed up a little bit higher in the afternoon. And if you have a look, as this market's pushing through, something that watches the other markets, and you'd see that I think it was the Nasdaq that was the one that was leading them up here. While the ES was hanging down here, the Nasdaq had already broken this equivalent pivot, and eventually the Russell did as well. So as the ES is breaking here, the Russell and Nasdaq already pushing well and truly through this area, and showing that these markets were bringing through a bit of a change. And then from there, we hit lunchtime, and it even slows up a little bit more. I think obviously the better opportunities are in the morning. Most traders, I'd say, just based on volume and market movement, are giving themselves half a day, and then I guess sitting back and just watching or having the afternoons off. I mean, not everyone, but that seems to be a bit of the case, as this market really struggles to move in the afternoons. So, but still, so from that, hopefully you can see that there's certainly opportunities there. They're going to take longer to play out, and there's going to be fewer of them, but they're still there, and it doesn't change the fact that you can't have profitable weeks and have something that's contributing to your end of year result. And that's the main thing here too, is always thinking about it from a yearly view or perspective. I set myself monthly and yearly goals. I never get too concerned what happens day to day, or never day to day. I mean, never concerned about day to day. You can't really impact what's going to happen day to day, really. But even week to week, I don't tend to have too much of a concern over what happens week to week. I really start looking at things on a month to month basis, and then ultimately working towards an end of year goal. And it's important to keep those sort of things intact, in these slow markets, so it keeps you from doing irrational things when these markets, these type of markets, as you've seen, they might play anything from 2 to 6 months of the year. It just really depends on the type of year you're having. Some years there's lots of these markets, some years there's not much, but you're guaranteed you're going to get at least a couple of months of these type of markets. So you want to learn how to trade them, and you want to make sure that you're keeping the end goal in mind, and that's what matters. So that's it for the day. Not a lot about the physical actual trading day, but we'll take it as it comes and see what happens on Tuesday. Speak to you guys soon.